In this video we'll discuss law of cosines and how to use it. So let's go ahead and get started. Law of cosines, just like law of sines, will apply to any triangle in particular. It doesn't have to be a right triangle, it could be obtuse, acute, whatever. So basically the formula goes, if I have the little side squared, so let's say for instance we're talking little a here. So we'll have little a squared, which would be the side length, is equal to b squared, being another side, plus c squared, minus 2bc times the cosine of the opposite angle of this side here. So in this case, big A. Now notice that these two are opposite one another. Okay, so this is different than law of sines, where if I knew an opposite angle side pair, I could solve for the other angles. This is useful for if you know an angle and the two sides next to it, or if you know all three sides of the triangle and you want to solve for an angle. Let's go ahead and put this into practice. Right here I know I have an angle, 124 degrees, and the two sides adjacent to it I know, but I don't know what x is. Notice in this case, law of sines won't help us. We don't know what any of the other two angles are. We have no idea. So what we'll start with is we'll just say x is our opposite side here. This is the opposite side pair. So I know x squared has to equal something. So what I do is I say x squared is equal to 5 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 times 5 times 14 times the cosine of 124 degrees. Just using the formula, just plugging the things into the right spots. X would be our A, 5 would be our B, and 14 would be our little c. Okay, we just simplify this down a little bit. We have x squared has to equal 25 plus 196 minus, 140 times the cosine of 124 degrees. Let's take it just a little further. X squared is equal to 221, just combining these two pieces here, minus 140 cosine times 124 degrees. Okay, at this point, this is usually where I run to my calculator, and then just something to note here. This expression, there's a multiplication sign in here. So be very careful to do this part first before you deal with subtraction. You don't want to subtract the 140 from the 221 by accident. It's a common mistake, and it's something that can happen and really mess up your calculation. If you punch this into your calculator, you get x squared has to equal 299.287, roughly. Now notice this is what x squared is. If I want to know what x is, I just have to square root both sides. So if I just take the square root of this number, I'll get my answer. And after I run to the calculator, I get x is roughly 17.2999. Okay, let's look at an example where we're using law of cosines to find an angle. In this case, we know all three sides of the triangle, and we are looking for theta, the angle between the 7 and the 17. So, since I'm looking for an opposite pair again, I'm going to have to use 12 squared as my little a squared for our example in the formula. So 12 squared has to equal 7 squared plus 17 squared minus 2 times 7 times 17 times the cosine of theta. And now we just have to work our equation down and solve for theta. So simplifying a little bit, I get 144 equals 49 plus 289 minus 238 cosine of theta. Simplifying just a bit more, we get 144 has to equal 338 minus 238 cosine of theta. Simplifying a touch more, we get negative 194 has to equal negative 238 cosine of theta. Still trying to get theta by itself. We'll divide both sides by negative 238. And if we do that, we get roughly 0.81512 is equal to cosine of theta. Now, if I want to get theta by itself, I have to apply the inverse of cosine on both sides. So theta is going to equal cosine inverse of 0.8152, or 512, forgive me. If I run to my calculator and punch that in, I get roughly 35.4 degrees. And that would be how big theta is, roughly. So there's two examples, one finding angles and one finding side lengths. Law of cosines, again, is just, you can use it when law of sines doesn't work. So if you're using trigonometry, if you have a triangle, first check and see if right triangle trig will work. If that doesn't work, see if law of sines will apply, and then law of cosines. It's a little more messy than the other two methods, but if it's what you got, it's what you got. Hope this video was of use to you, and good luck.